What if I told you that true love has no limits, that it can challenge even the deepest barriers of society? Rafael, a millionaire who has everything anyone could wish for, and Isabel, a simple maid, never imagined their paths would cross. What begins as a fleeting glance soon turns into something impossible to deny. But can a love like this really overcome what the world expects from them? In the end, will what they feel for each other be enough to break the chains of social class and convention? Stay until the end to discover how this story will challenge all limits of love. Leave a like if you believe love can conquer all, and tell us, do you think their love can be eternal? Or will it be destroyed by the circumstances? Let's find out together.
It was a cold autumn afternoon, and the wind, light and biting, seemed to carry with it the weight of the dry leaves that danced on the ground. The warm colors of the scene seemed to fade as the day bid farewell, giving way to a quiet and melancholic twilight. Rafael, a millionaire deeply involved in the business and luxuries that his fortune provided, crossed the grand hall of the Almeida mansion with a distant look, as if he already knew every corner of that house. He was used to being the center of attention, to being courted by those who desired more than just his company. They wanted his money, his status, his power. Everyone bowed before him, always with a calculated smile, always with sweet words and gestures of flattery. But that day, something unexpected happened. When his eyes met Isabel's, his routine was interrupted in a way he could never have predicted. Isabel was not like the others. She didn't look at him with the same gleam of interest as so many others did. Her presence was discreet, but in a way that stood out. Her gaze had a unique depth, a quiet intensity, as if she carried within her secrets and unspoken dreams that she would never dare reveal. She was simple, but there was something rare and fascinating about her, something Rafael couldn't quite identify, but that somehow drew him in. While the other maids were busy with their tasks, Isabel stood by the window watching the last lights of the day. She didn't care about the mansion's glamour, nor the luxuries that came with her employer's life. Her world was different, and perhaps that was exactly what sparked in Rafael an irresistible curiosity. She seemed to be the only person in the room who wasn't swayed by the grandeur of his fortune, the only one who didn't see him as a means to an end. Rafael, used to being desired for his money, was surprised by himself. He didn't know what it was, but he felt there was something more to Isabel, something that transcended appearances and conventions. Her beauty was subtle, almost imperceptible to those more concerned with the superficialities of life. But Rafael noticed, and in that moment, as the leaves fell outside and the afternoon's chill grew more intense, he knew that something was about to change, and perhaps it was this change that he feared the most. Isabel, for her part, barely noticed the intensity of Rafael's gaze. She was used to being invisible, to living in the shadows of the Almeida mansion, fulfilling her role with dignity, but never allowing herself to be more than that. She knew that her dreams, no matter how vivid they were, belonged to a distant and unreachable world, far from the reach of those who had lived in opulence their entire lives. And although she didn't fully understand what was happening, a part of Isabel felt that this encounter had something special about it. Something that, if allowed to blossom, would change not only the course of their lives, but everything she believed was possible. Isabel, for her part, knew that the world she lived in was distant from Rafael's, and this awareness was the only thing that gave her any peace. She saw herself as a shadow, almost imperceptible, amidst the opulent gleam of the mansion. While the people around her indulged in luxury and extravagance, she confined herself to her silent and invisible role. She was a figure that served but would never truly be seen, except as someone who occupied space without ever truly being noticed. She allowed herself nothing more than that. Her life was confined within the walls of the Almeida house, where the marble walls and crystal chandeliers were constant reminders of her own insignificance. There was an insurmountable distance between her and the world of the rich and powerful. Isabel knew that, although Rafael's glances were more than mere gestures of courtesy, her place there would never be one of equality. He was a man who had everything, and she, a woman who had nothing but her own quiet dreams. She tried to maintain distance, not just physically, but emotionally, because she knew she was not worthy of dreaming beyond her reality. She did not dare to believe that someone like him could even care about someone like her. Her eyes, which at times met his, always averted, as if seeking refuge in her hands or in some other corner of the space. She was aware of her position. She knew what was expected of her: to work without question, to desire no more than what was necessary to survive. But with every exchanged glance, something forbidden awakened within her. A growing yet fearful desire, like a fragile flame in the midst of the autumn's cold wind. It was a disconcerting feeling, an attraction that made no sense, that challenged everything she had always believed about her place in the world. She wanted to distance herself from this feeling, knowing she could not allow it to grow, but it was stronger than she was. Every chance encounter, every shy smile he directed at her, only fed the flame that burned discreetly inside her. Isabel feared what this could mean. She knew her feelings were a fantasy, a delirium from someone who shouldn't even think of the possibility of anything beyond her daily life. She, a simple maid, and he, a businessman, with wealth, with power. The chasm between their worlds seemed insurmountable, and this thought pushed her to remain in her shadowy position. She could not, should not, desire more than what was given to her. However, desire did not ask permission to be born, and with every exchanged glance, the more Isabel found herself trapped in an impossible dream, further from her reality, and at the same time closer to a pain she didn't know how to avoid. The relationship between Rafael and Isabel began in an unexpected way, almost like a meeting of two worlds that should never have crossed. In the beginning, it was a quiet curiosity on Rafael's part, as he began to observe Isabel more often. It wasn't just the calm beauty she exuded, but something deeper and more uncommon. She wasn't like the other women he knew, those who came into his life drawn by the shine of money or by the promise of the status he represented. Isabel was different. She seemed to be above all of that, more focused on her own concerns, her own reality. Rafael then began to take notice of her in a way he had never done with anyone else. She was intelligent, possessing a silent strength that was reflected in her actions and words. She didn't appear eager for recognition, and that attracted him. There was an integrity in her, an authenticity that Rafael had never experienced amidst the social circle he moved in. He had always been surrounded by people who approached him out of interest, who saw him as a prize to be won. But Isabel didn't seem to care about what he represented. She treated him with respect, but with the same dignity she would give to anyone else, not allowing herself to be seduced by the aura of power and wealth he carried. No matter how much he tried to keep his distance, Rafael couldn't help but feel fascinated by her. It was something more than mere physical attraction. There was a connection, a sense that she understood something he himself couldn't yet grasp. She wasn't dazzled, wasn't enchanted by his fortune. Isabel looked at him in a way no one else ever had, as if she could see beyond the surface, to something deeper that he was trying to hide. Isabel, in turn, felt a silent and growing attraction to Rafael, but her reserved nature made her pull back. She saw him not only as the powerful and rich man everyone sought to please, but as someone who, behind the facade of coldness and wealth, carried immense loneliness. It was as if he were trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by a life that didn't fulfill him. And that, in some way, touched Isabel deeply. She saw beyond the man who seemed to have everything. She saw an emptiness, an absence he probably didn't even know how to fill. She never approached him, never pursued him. Her place had always been in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the tasks the invisible world she belonged to had destined her to fulfill. However, something in her gaze changed when she found herself by his side for longer periods, when the words exchanged became more frequent, more personal, less formal. Isabel began to realize there was a man there, not just a millionaire, and the distance between them began to shrink, in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. And so, little by little, their relationship began to take shape. There were no promises made, no grand gestures. Everything was delicate, born of furtive glances, almost secret conversations, and small moments of complicity that bloomed amidst the everyday life of the mansion. Rafael and Isabel, from such distinct worlds, began to discover that what truly united them was not what the world saw, but what no one else noticed. The genuine connection between two lonely hearts, searching for something deeper, something more true. And as this unfolded, they both found themselves drawn not by what they could offer each other in material terms, but by the promise of something intangible, a feeling that could perhaps be the only thing capable of breaking the barriers between their worlds. The encounters between Rafael and Isabel began discreetly, like a silent dance that they both tried, unknowingly, to choreograph. There were no grand declarations, no overwhelming moments. It was something simple, almost imperceptible to the eyes of those who observed them. A conversation here, a gentle gesture there. Rafael began to find her in the quieter corners of the mansion, where she, always with her reserved posture, spent hours taking care of daily tasks. He, with a subtle smile, would ask about her day, her thoughts, her opinions. Questions that seemed trivial, but in reality, made his heart beat in a way he couldn't explain. Isabel, with her soft voice, spoke with a gentleness that touched something deep in Rafael. Every word she said carried weight, a sincerity he rarely encountered in the people in his life. He listened attentively, feeling an unexpected connection, something that went beyond the superficiality of the interactions he was accustomed to having with everyone around him. Isabel, for her part, was cautious. She never allowed herself more than a brief exchange of words. She knew she wasn't worthy of a love like that, and even if something grew within her, she kept it to herself. Her voice was always soft, humble, and her eyes, which met his, carried a world of suppressed feelings. She never asked for anything. She never desired more than what was allowed her. Her reality was rooted in a place far from his, among the servants and the responsibilities that came with it. She knew her place, and his was far beyond her reach. Among the powerful, among those who needed nothing more, who lived in a world of luxury and choices, and she who could hardly allow herself to dream of anything beyond her daily life. But despite this, something inside Isabel began to change. She felt the growing intensity of her attraction to Rafael, but she held back, knowing she could never be more than a fleeting figure in his life. She, who had always known her place in the world, suddenly found herself tempted to believe that maybe there was more than what fate had mapped out for her. But even so, with her heart racing with each encounter, she remained firm in the reality she knew. She couldn't deceive herself. They came from different worlds, and the barriers between them were far more than physical. They were social, cultural, almost unchangeable. Rafael, on the other hand, didn't fully understand what was happening. He found himself drawn to the simplicity and depth of Isabel, but his life had always been governed by a set of rules he knew he had to respect. He felt a growing connection, something that challenged him to look beyond wealth and power. But he also knew that, in a way, he could never be more than a fleeting presence in her life. And so, between furtive glances and words exchanged with the lightness of the wind, something real began to grow between them, something they both tried to hide, fearing the consequences of surrendering to this feeling. They met, but always in the shadows, away from curious eyes, aware that no matter how genuine what they felt was, the world around them would never allow it to be anything more. But fate, as always, had other plans. On a cold gala night, when the halls of the mansion were illuminated by crystal chandeliers and the sound of music filled the air, Rafael felt strangely distant from the glow around him. Everyone was immersed in empty conversations, laughing and exchanging compliments, but he couldn't focus on anything except the image of Isabel, who, as always, remained unnoticed in the shadows, fulfilling her role, maintaining the distance the world imposed on her. He couldn't bear it any longer. The weight of the distance between them, the separation imposed by the roles each one was meant to play, became unbearable. And it was in that moment, when the night seemed to envelop everything in a cloak of glitter and superficiality, that he did something unexpected. Rafael stepped away from the party, the curious gazes of the guests still circling around his imposing figure. He walked to the back door of the mansion and, with a determined gesture, searched for Isabel. He found her in the hallway, somewhat aside, as though she were waiting for something, perhaps a chance that never seemed to come. Without saying a word, he silently invited her with his gaze to join him in the garden. The night air was cool, and the garden was bathed in the soft light of the moon. The tall, imposing trees created gentle shadows, and the sound of the leaves in the wind seemed to match the rapid rhythm of his heart. They walked side by side, without hurry, without words, until they reached a secluded corner, where the only company was the silver light that illuminated them in an almost magical way. There, in the silence of the night, Rafael finally turned to her. The moment was charged with silent tension, but there was also a sense of relief in the air. He looked into Isabel's eyes, as he never had before, and everything he felt overflowed without barriers. "Isabel," he said, his voice soft but firm, "since the moment I saw you, something changed in me. I can't explain it, but I feel that you are the person I've always been looking for, even though the world tries to keep us apart." The words, though simple, carried an intensity that could not be ignored. Rafael stepped closer, and for the first time, he didn't care about conventions or what people would think. He felt an undeniable truth in what he was saying, a truth he had kept inside for so long. The weight of expectations, social norms, and the differences between their worlds seemed to dissipate under the moonlight, as if, right there in that moment, anything was possible. Isabel, for her part, stood frozen, surprise and disbelief taking over her body. Rafael's words touched her in a way she never imagined possible. He was confessing his feelings, something she had secretly feared and desired at the same time. But upon hearing it, a part of her knew that this moment would change everything for both of them. She looked at him, her gaze still filled with doubt, with fear, but also with a quiet hope she had kept hidden for so long. She knew that nothing would be easy. She knew that obstacles would still exist. But there, under the moonlight and with Rafael's heart so open to her, something inside her told her that, perhaps, it might be possible to challenge fate. Perhaps, just perhaps, their love could endure, even when the world seemed determined to tear them apart. Isabel looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope, as if she were trying to believe the words coming from her own mouth, but unable to set aside the reality surrounding her. The soft night breeze caressed her hair, but the weight of what she felt seemed to crush any lightness around her. "But Rafael, I'm just a maid," she said, her voice trembling, as if those words were a burden she had carried within her for a long time, and now, finally, needed to be released. She took a step back, as if his closeness was something she couldn't allow. "Our love would be impossible. People would never accept us, and you wouldn't be able to face it. Your life is different. I'm invisible to everyone." The words came from her mouth almost like a sigh, a bitter confession she forced herself to make, even though the pain of it tore her apart inside. She knew she was being realistic, but at the same time, the part of her that allowed herself to dream didn't want to believe what she was saying. She wanted to believe that it could be different, that Rafael could be more than just a man surrounded by the appearance of a perfect and untouchable world. But the truth was that she was just a shadow, an invisible piece that occupied a distant and relegated place in the game of his life. Rafael for a moment was silent. Isabel's gaze, full of sincerity and pain, made his heart tighten in a way he didn't know was possible. He knew she was right about many things she said. She was right in saying that her position in society made her invisible to the eyes of many. And he also knew that the weight of conventions and social expectations was immense, that being seen with someone from his class could be a greater challenge than any of the problems he had ever faced. But he couldn't accept that this was the end. He couldn't. "Isabel," he said, his voice laden with an emotion he had never expressed before. "You are not invisible to me. You never have been. I see you. I see everything you are. And that's what attracts me. I don't care about conventions or what the world thinks. What matters is what I feel, what you awaken in me. I don't want you to hide behind this idea that you're just a maid, as if that's all you are. It's not." He took a step toward her, as if his words were the only thing capable of bridging the abyss that separated them. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know that I can't live with the idea of losing you, of not trying, of settling for this distance the world tries to impose between us." Isabel felt her heart beat faster, an internal struggle raging within her. Hope and fear were so intertwined that she barely knew what to do. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that what he felt was real, that the world could change if they wanted it to. But she also knew what reality required of them, and the risks were too great. She looked at him, her gaze faltering, the words caught in her throat. "Rafael, I don't know if I can believe in this. The life you lead, the people around you. Everything is so different from who I am. I'm just a simple woman, and you have the world at your feet. I can't be part of that." Rafael didn't back away. He stood there in front of her with steady eyes, defying everything the world said was impossible. And that's why I want to fight Isabel. Because to me, it doesn't matter what we are in the eyes of others. What matters is what we are when we are together. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was a silence full of emotions, of choices that hadn't yet been made, but were beginning to take shape with clarity. Isabel felt her heart torn between the desire to give herself to what fate seemed to want and the fear of losing everything she knew. But something inside her still whispered that maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it to challenge the impossible. Rafael didn't hesitate. The silence that surrounded them seemed to weigh on him, but he could no longer allow fear or doubt to hold him back. Isabel's gaze, torn between fear and hope, made his heart race. He knew he needed to act, needed to break the distance that the world and even he had placed between them. He took a step forward, approaching Isabel with a determination that came from the depths of his soul. Without saying a word, he took her hand firmly, feeling the softness of her fingers, as if that was the only thing that truly mattered in that moment. His eyes were fixed on hers, and as he touched her, an intense warmth coursed through his body, as if the connection between them was stronger than any barrier fate could try to impose. "I don't care what people think," he said, his voice clear and decisive, breaking the tension that hung in the air. "What I know is that my life without you doesn't make sense. I love you, Isabel, and I can't live without you by my side." The words fell on Isabel like an avalanche, not as a weight, but as a release. It was what she feared most, and at the same time, what she longed to hear more than anything. She felt a tightness in her chest, but also an inexplicable calm, as if everything she had always avoided was finally aligning in a way she could no longer ignore. She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears, but with an intensity she had never shown before. The fear was still there, the doubt, the uncertainty about what the future might hold. But there was something stronger, something she could no longer ignore. The love that was growing between them, the truth unfolding before her eyes, even though, at the same time, it seemed so difficult to reach. Isabel couldn't speak immediately. The words were lost in her throat, and she stood there, hand in his, feeling the sincerity of every syllable Rafael had just spoken. He was so sure of his feelings, so determined to fight for something she had judged impossible. And no matter how much she tried to convince herself that this couldn't be real, something inside her told her that maybe, just maybe, all it took was a step of faith to discover that the impossible truly didn't exist. "Rafael, I don't know what to say." Her voice faltered, but her eyes shone, revealing the whirlwind of emotions within her. I never imagined you could feel this way about me. I'm just a maid. And you are everything the world wants and more." He gently squeezed her hand, as if to reaffirm what he had just said. "You are more than anything the world wants, Isabel. You are everything I need." The silence between them was now filled with an indescribable tenderness. And, for the first time, Isabel realized that maybe the love between them wasn't something to be feared, but something to be lived, despite all the difficulties that could arise. Maybe together they could face the world, break the barriers life tried to impose. And without another word, she moved closer to him, feeling the warmth of his presence, the firm touch of his hand intertwined with hers. It was the beginning of something new, something that, despite all the uncertainties, might be the only true thing she had ever experienced. Their love, which had seemed impossible, was now the only thing that mattered. Isabel's heart raced, as if the world around her had stopped for a moment. She felt the weight of reality pressing against her chest, the pain of the impossible sea seeping into every thought. But at the same time, something stronger was beginning to emerge within her. It was a subtle force, but unmistakable. The love that, despite all its uncertainties and risks, was blooming between them. She knew, with a clarity that frightened her, that there were no words enough to express everything she was feeling. There was a mix of fear and joy, disbelief and hope, as if something that had always been distant and unattainable was suddenly within reach of her hands. But at the same time, Isabel felt that this something, as beautiful and true as it was, came with a deep pain. The pain of knowing that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles, judgments, and difficult choices. She looked at Rafael, her eyes brimming with tears, and felt that the love growing between them was not just a romantic feeling, but something much greater and more complex. It was a love that defied everything she knew, all the conventions society imposed, all the unspoken rules about who could love whom. To her, the difference between their worlds seemed insurmountable, a wall impossible to scale. But there, in the warmth of the night and the soft touch of his hand, something told her that the impossible should not be what separated them, but what would unite them. She felt the strength of that love growing inside her, expanding with every beat of her heart. It didn't matter that she was just a simple maid and he was a man of power and prestige. It didn't matter that the world saw them as figures from different worlds. What mattered at that moment was what they shared. Something true, something pure, that could not be measured by society's rules, but only by the feelings that burned in their hearts. Their love defied everything, expectations, the roles life had assigned to them both, the invisible barriers society built every day. And although Isabel knew that the road ahead would be twisted, that they would face criticism, glances, and judgments, she also knew that by Rafael's side, she would no longer be alone. Together, they could face the impossible and try to make what was beginning between them in some way, greater than any obstacle. She looked at him, her eyes shining with silent intensity, and for the first time, she didn't care about what the future held for them. What mattered in that moment was the now. The love that was being born, pure and genuine, between two souls that, though separated by the world, had found each other in the simplest and truest form of connection. And deep down, Isabel knew that with Rafael by her side, she could face anything, even the impossible. In the following days, the relationship between Rafael and Isabel grew quietly but intensely, like a flame that, despite the opposing winds, refused to be extinguished. Every meeting, every shared gesture, reinforced what they already knew deep down in their hearts. The love that bound them was real, and there was no longer any way to ignore it. But the path that lay ahead of them was far from easy. Rafael knew that his decision to follow his heart would have consequences. It didn't take long for the criticisms to start intensifying, especially from his family and closest friends. He, a powerful man accustomed to being admired and respected, now found himself surrounded by disapproving glances. His parents, in particular, couldn't understand how he could get involved with someone of such low status. "You're giving yourself to an illusion," his father would say, the coldness in his words reflecting the disapproval of a lifetime built on status and appearances. His friends, more concerned with fancy lunches and glamorous parties, saw him as someone who had fallen in love with a woman who could never accompany him in his world of luxury and privilege. With every cruel comment, every reproachful look, Rafael felt the pressure increase. But instead of weakening, his determination only grew. He was not willing to abandon Isabel. He was not willing to give up on a love that made him feel more alive than any wealth or status ever could. The idea of following the path that everyone around him expected, marrying someone from his class, maintaining appearances and respecting traditions, became unbearable to him. He wanted something more, something that would truly fulfill him. And no matter how hard he tried to convince himself that what he felt for Isabel might be a fleeting illusion, what he felt was undeniable. Every obstacle, every criticism, only made him more determined to prove, not to the world, but to himself, that the love between him and Isabel was worth more than any wealth or status. He didn't want to live to please others, to follow a path that would never make him happy. He wanted to live a true life, by the side of someone who understood him, who loved him for who he truly was, not for his fortune or position. Isabel, in turn, although apart from the criticisms he received, knew the pain he carried. She saw him face the weight of his family's expectations, the disapproval of his friends, and at the same time he gave himself to a love that made her feel torn between the joy of what they lived together and the fear of what the future held. She also felt the limitations of her position, the pressure of being someone who, in the eyes of the world, shouldn't be there. But with every exchanged glance, every word whispered between them, she also felt that the love they shared was something rare, something she didn't want to give up. "It doesn't matter what they say," Rafael said to her on one of those silent nights, as they walked through the garden bathed in moonlight. "I won't let what I feel for you be destroyed by other people's opinions. What matters is what we have, what we are together." Isabel looked at him, her heart tight, but touched by Rafael's words. She knew the road wouldn't be easy, that the difficulties would test them in ways they couldn't even imagine. But looking at him, she felt the same certainty he had. Their love, despite everything, was stronger than any criticism, more real than any obstacle life could place in their path. And so, with every challenge, with every barrier imposed by the world, Rafael and Isabel became stronger, more united. They knew that the love they shared was not just an escape from reality, but a force capable of changing everything around them, of transforming the impossible into something possible, something worth fighting for. Isabel, in turn, struggled with her own inner demons. The love she felt for Rafael was deep, genuine, and she loved him with all her soul. Every gesture, every word made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. But along with this overwhelming love came a shadow of insecurity that consumed her, like an invisible weight she couldn't shake off. The fear of losing Rafael, of being left behind by the difficulties their love imposed, gnawed at her every day. She knew that his life was different from hers, that he was surrounded by a world of luxury, expectations, and conventions. And she, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, knew that her place in that world was humble. She was just a maid in the Almeida mansion, a simple woman who would never be able to keep up with Rafael in his life of wealth and power. He could, at any moment, choose someone more suited to his level, someone who was more aligned with society's expectations, someone who would be seen as a worthy choice for him. Doubt consumed Isabel, taking over her thoughts and feelings. She constantly wondered if Rafael truly loved her, or if somewhere deep inside him, he felt trapped in a love that didn't make sense for the world he lived in. She feared that, at any moment, he might awaken from this illusion and finally see the abyss that existed between them, a gap she knew was insurmountable. The pain of being too much for him, but too little for the world, was present in every smile he gave her, in every sweet word he whispered. Their love to her was like a fragile flame, a fire that burned with intensity, but at any moment could be extinguished by the first strong wind, the first challenging obstacle. She didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't help it. It was as if, no matter how much happiness was there, in the present, she felt that the future was dark and uncertain. The thought of losing Rafael, of being abandoned by him because of the differences that separated them, terrified her in a way she didn't know how to control. Isabel tried to hide this fear, to be strong for him, but inside, she felt more and more fragile. How could she, a woman of humble origins, keep someone like Rafael by her side? He was a man of the world, surrounded by people who could offer him everything he wanted, while she was just a shadow moving silently through the halls of the mansion. She knew that Rafael loved her. That was clear to her, and he had never shown anything different. But the fear that this love wouldn't be enough to overcome everything the world demanded from them consumed her, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that their love was a house of cards, ready to collapse under the pressures of real life. Isabel felt lost in her own feelings, unable to make a clear decision, but also unable to pull away from Rafael. Their love was real, but she feared that the weight of reality might be too much for it to withstand. All she wanted was to believe that what they felt for each other could be enough. But deep down, the fear of being left behind, of being seen as less than he deserved, haunted her like a ghost, making every moment with him a sweet and bitter struggle between the desire to be loved and the fear of being forgotten. But Rafael did not give up. He knew that the love between him and Isabel was not something that could be easily surrendered at the first difficulty. With every criticism he received, with every disapproving glance, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but at the same time, his determination only grew. He knew that without Isabel, his life would have no value. None of the things he had achieved so far, no wealth, no status, could fill the emptiness he felt without her by his side. She was the only one who truly understood what he really was, the only one who saw him beyond what his fortune or name could offer. He fought against all the opposing winds, those coming from his family, his friends, and even his own thoughts, which sometimes tried to make him doubt. They saw him as a man who was losing himself in a fantasy, falling in love with someone who wasn't on his level, someone who could never keep up with him in his world of luxury and power. But to Rafael, none of this made sense. He didn't need a perfect world or a future without challenges. What he needed was Isabel, the simple and true way she loved him. She completed him in a way he never imagined possible, giving him a sense of peace and purpose that nothing else in his life could provide. In the eyes of everyone, he might have been making a mistake, choosing to follow a love that seemed to condemn him to failure. But Rafael knew he was choosing what truly mattered. It didn't matter what others thought or said. He was willing to face any obstacle, any difficulty, to be with her. What was worth fighting for was being by Isabel's side, fighting for her and for that love which, despite being so uncommon, was real and sincere. He knew the challenges wouldn't be easy. There would be criticism, obstacles, and maybe even moments when the distance between them would seem unbearable. But Rafael was no longer willing to give up the happiness he found in Isabel. What he felt for her was so much more than a fleeting passion or a youthful whim. It was the foundation of something deep, something that defied all the conventions society tried to impose on them. With every step he took toward her, with every gesture of support and affection, he felt that his life was finally heading in the right direction. He didn't have all the answers, didn't know what the future held, but he knew, with all the certainty in his heart, that the only place he wanted to be was by Isabel's side. Nothing else mattered. And so, with the weight of others' expectations upon him, Rafael made the decision to follow his heart, without looking back. He was ready to fight against everything and everyone because he knew that, in the end, the only real obstacle would be living without her. And that, he was not willing to accept. Touched by Rafael's determination, Isabel finally began to believe that their love could indeed withstand the tests of time. His words, so firm and full of conviction, penetrated her heart and made the doubts that had tormented her for so long disappear. She had always feared that their love was fragile, something destined to fade in the face of the difficulties and differences that the world imposed. But as she looked at him, at his strength, his courage to fight for her, Isabel realized that perhaps their love was stronger than she had ever imagined. With this new certainty, she gave herself to him completely, body and soul, without further fear. There was no longer any room for the insecurity that had once consumed her, nor for the fear of being left behind. The trust she placed in him became a solid foundation on which she stood. What they had, with all its imperfections, with all the obstacles they would still face, was unique. And that was all that mattered. Isabel now understood that their love didn't need the approval of anyone else. The world, with its critical eyes and rigid expectations, might never understand what she and Rafael shared, but that didn't matter. They knew, deep in their hearts, that it was real, and no matter how many difficulties rose in their path, nothing could erase what existed between them. What they had was more valuable than any judgment, stronger than any prejudice. She surrendered to him completely, knowing that if they were together, nothing could separate them. The love that was growing between them was the purest truth she had ever known, and nothing, not the criticism nor the challenges, could diminish the brilliance of that connection. Isabel finally accepted that she deserved to live this story, that she deserved Rafael's love, and that together they could create something stronger than any norm or expectation the world might impose. And so, with a light heart and a surrendered soul, Isabel no longer feared the future. She knew that by Rafael's side, any obstacle would be easier to face. Their love, even if misunderstood by others, was all she had ever needed. And now, more than ever, she believed that this love, the strength they had together, could withstand any test that time might impose. Rafael and Isabel's love defied all the limits imposed by society. From the beginning, their relationship was seen as impossible, a story that should not exist, simply because the world was more accustomed to seeing the differences between them than the similarities. But, as time went on, the resistance from others began to break down, albeit slowly. Those who had once looked at the couple with disdain started to realize that there was something deeper, more powerful between them than simply what the eyes could see. Rafael and Isabel didn't need to prove anything, but by simply living their love, they showed the world that true love knows no barriers. It doesn't care about social class, position, or wealth that separate people, because it comes from the heart, not from the conventions that try to shape what is acceptable. Over time, the world began to understand that what they shared was not an illusion, nor a rebellion without cause, but something real, genuine, that transcended all the norms that had been imposed upon them. Little by little, the criticisms faded, and the disapproving looks became less intense. People began to see the love between Rafael and Isabel not as something transgressive, but as a pure and unchangeable truth, a force that could not be denied. Day after day, they proved that when two souls truly meet, nothing can separate them, no matter how much the world tries to place barriers between them. Their love, genuine and unbreakable, defied all expectations and showed that social conventions were merely a construct, an attempt to limit what the heart can truly reach. Rafael and Isabel became an example for everyone, not because they sought to be a symbol of resistance, but because they lived what they felt with authenticity. They demonstrated in practice that true love is not governed by external rules, but by a deep connection that goes beyond superficial understanding. They showed that, in the end, what truly matters is what unites people, and that no barrier, no matter how solid it may seem, is strong enough to withstand something as pure as true love. And so, while the world unsuccessfully tried to separate them, Rafael and Isabel continued to build their story, proving, in the simplicity of their love, that when two souls meet, nothing can separate them. Nothing. And so, the story of the millionaire and the maid transformed into a tale of eternal love, a testament to the strength of a feeling that transcends all the barriers of the world. What mattered most was not what they possessed, Rafael's wealth or Isabel's humility, but what they were to each other. Together, they had created something that went beyond social conventions, something built on a deep understanding and a connection that didn't need words to be explained. They had overcome the limits imposed by society, the expectations of their families, the judgmental looks, and the relentless criticisms. None of this could erase the shine of what they felt. On the contrary, each obstacle they faced made them stronger, more united. Day after day, they proved that true love has no boundaries, does not bend to circumstances, but is built on mutual trust, respect, and the surrender of two souls willing to live what they felt without fear of what the world thinks. Rafael and Isabel knew that the future might hold even greater challenges. The difficulties, the differences between their worlds, might still appear in their path, but none of that scared them. The love they had cultivated was solid, deep, and nothing could extinguish it. They had learned that when you truly love, the hardships become only part of the journey, not its end. And so, together, they built a love that would withstand time, adversity, and the changes life might bring. It was a love that did not depend on wealth, social position, or appearance, but on what was eternal and unchanging, the deep connection between two people who, upon meeting, recognized what they meant to each other. Rafael and Isabel didn't know what the future would bring, but what mattered was that, as long as they were together, no challenge would be great enough to separate them. And in the end, what would remain would be the love they had built, a love that would never be erased, because it didn't come from the outside, but from the innermost part of their hearts.